thank you all for coming out tonight. I know that it's spring break coming up, so I really appreciate your presence and your interest in this event. We're particularly going to be talking about climate careers in corporate action and sustainability tonight, and we have a fantastic panel that I would like to introduce now. I'd like to first start with Dr. Lea Borkenhagen. She is the Senior Vice President of EDF+Business, directing EDF's strategy to catalyze private sector action that accelerates the transition to net zero emissions, creates safer products, and feeds the world without warming the planet. And Dr. Borkenhagen brings 2 decades of experience in driving positive environmental and social outcomes through business leadership by developing future-facing strategies with the top global food, fashion, retail, and tech companies. She served as the Global Strategy and Innovation Advisor to the Earthshot Prize, crafting the strategy to find solutions to the world's most pressing environmental challenges. Prior to that, Dr. Borkenhagen spent 10 years at Nike, where she led a brand-only collaboration of global fashion, retail, and sportswear companies representing over $250 billion in revenue to deliver accelerated impacts on sustainability industry-wide. She also headed Nike's strategy to overturn a decades-old approach to labor and instead value it as a revenue driver, working from faculty level to board. Before Nike, Lea led Oxfam GB's global livelihoods work, enabling her team to co-found the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil and the Better Cotton Initiative, to build globally relevant frameworks for understanding business impacts on poverty and to create accelerator fund mechanisms to support businesses that involve wages for low-income populations. He also holds a PhD in environmental science, policy, and management from the University of California, Berkeley, and an undergraduate degree from Harvard University in biological anthropology. Next to Lea is Pamela Fletcher. Pamela is a seasoned executive with over 3 decades of experience across the automotive and transportation industries, with a proven track record of leading innovation, creating new high-growth businesses, driving market expansion, and growing new revenue streams. Currently, Fletcher serves as the Lumentum Board of Directors and on the Board of Advisors for the College of Engineering at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. Previously, Fletcher was Senior Vice President, Chief Sustainability Officer, and Corporate Innovation at Delta Airlines, where she led Delta's sustainability and innovation organizations in service of the company's net zero future. And prior to Delta Airlines, she enjoyed a 15-year career at General Motors, where she held senior leadership positions such as Vice President of Global Innovation and Vice President of Electric Vehicles, among other roles. Additionally, Ms. Fletcher holds a Bachelor of Engineering degree from the Kettering University and a Master of Engineering degree from Wayne State University. She also completed executive education programs at Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management, Harvard Business School, and the Stanford University Graduate School of Business. And finally, it is a pleasure to introduce Valeria Tiberi, who is one of our event interns and a MBA student at Harvard Business School. Valeria is dedicated to solving climate and energy issues by fostering public-private partnerships to catalyze change and financing inclusive solutions against climate change. Before a student at HBS, she was a consultant at Bain & Company, working mainly on energy projects where she witnessed firsthand the challenges companies face to advance the energy transition and integrate ESG strategy into their daily operations. Additionally, Valeria co-founded Opportunità Italia, a nonprofit aimed at increasing young people's exposure to jobs in the public sector and training tri-sector entrepreneurs in Italy. It's a great honor to have the 3 of these amazing humans together tonight to share about their careers in climate action and more about the work that they're doing on the ground right now. So thank you to you, and turning it over to you, Valeria.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Leslie, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight for this conversation. I'm going to ask Pamela a few questions, but I'll make sure to leave time also for your questions because we really want this to be an insightful conversation. Lea, I might start with you. As Leslie said, your career spans across several sectors, from food and agriculture, you then moved to fashion, private and no-profit sector. So can you walk us through your journey? What led you to being a senior vice president at EDF now, and which are the main differences that you experienced throughout this journey?
Great. Well, thank you again for the opportunity to be here. Thank you, Leslie and the team. It's a thrill to be on the panel with you guys. So I did my undergrad here at Harvard. It's fun to be back and to see old haunts. When I was here, I was super interested in the rainforest, and I bugged one of my professors to let me go and be a research assistant in Kalimantan, in Borneo, following orangutans and gibbons and whatever else was I could follow in the rainforest. But I realized really quickly that while I love natural places, what I was really interested in was how people make decisions about the resources and how those decisions then determine what happens to the resource. And for me, it was very much a question of how do I understand better the social and economic mechanisms behind people's decision making. And that really has kind of kept through all of the work that I've done, trying to understand what are the incentives by which people make decisions to better use resources, and how can they do those in a way that are equitable, because when resources are made, resource decisions are made that are more inclusive, then the resources tend to be used better. And that really started with my understanding of farming, which is what I did for my PhD work. And increasingly that led to how corporates are making those decisions. So agriculture into corporate supply chains, and then how corporates themselves make those decisions. And yes, I ended up working kind of on private sector opportunities, but from the outside, from engaging with, from the NGO side in the UK, and then was in business for some time, and then now in the NGO world again. Really, I think there's a lot of opportunity on each, and they are very different. I think on one hand, the corporate world can make stuff happen. It can really kind of make decisions and move forward. The NGO place, I think, is a really important piece, in addition to academia, and collaborations with academia are really profound from the NGO side, in saying what is the science behind something, what is the economics behind something, what does good look like, that then can inform both how individual companies act and how wider ones do. And this, the journey of it for me has always been about trying to get those resource decisions that are more equitable and better for the planet, and different perspectives from NGO and private sector. I think, they've allowed me to advance change in different ways.
And now you're Senior Vice President at EDF+Business, and I saw on the website that you forge unexpected partnerships. So what does that mean? So,
the world is changing quickly, and climate change is happening. And we know there are places and sectors and parts of the world where it is most important for us to act as quickly as possible. So what we do at the Environmental Defense Fund is think, which are those sectors? Is it transportation? Is it food and agriculture? Which are those sectors that have the most impact on climate? And then how do we work to drive changes? Some is in the policy realm, some is in the business realm. And for my team, what we do is we look at the companies that have the greatest power to influence those sectors. And they have an interest in driving some of that change too. They might get market access or have first mover advantage, or be able to increase revenue with a new product or this kind of thing. And if there is some kind of common interest where it's in the interest of that important company, that influential company, and that's good for the planet, then that's where we kind of jump in. And we try to find ways where those kind of common goals are things that are actually going to allow those companies to go faster. We can insert the science and the econ, and those companies can go faster. And sometimes they are uncommon, because it might not be with a company that is labeled sustainable, kind of obviously. It might be one that has a huge huge carbon footprint or impact broadly, but that when they change it, the impact would be huge. When they lead for that sector, then the impact is going to be huge, and that's really why we're working in that kind of way. And we think engagement, really, when you're able to say, this is a risk to avoid, or this is a value you can create, that's where you start to see change, because it's in the interest of the company to do so.
And you mentioned one of the hard-to-abate, high polluters industry, which is transportation. And you, Pam, have spent almost your whole career working in the transportation industry. So can you walk us through your journey? What led you to choose this industry for your career, and how does it play such a critical role?
Sure. So I'll make it a little personal at first, because I think in the end we're all humans and we're driven by emotion a lot of times, more so than data and statistics. So my father raced cars as a hobby. I mean, some families are, gardens, some families play golf, some families are equestrian, and a host of other things. And my family went to the racetrack. And the sounds, the smell, which is stuff we don't want to have anymore. It was addictive because it's so much adrenaline. It was excitement, and I thought, wow, I was having a ball, as a kid. And I thought, what on earth am I going to do when I have to go to college? And science and math was kind of my thing, and I'm like, I can't be a doctor because I can't see people in pain. Like that's not happening. But at the moment, I thought I love cars, and so I wanted to go to the auto industry. I had zero connections to the auto industry, so I thought, how on earth am I going to break into that? And so I went to a school that was very much associated with the auto industry. I should also add that my mother was Mrs. Fix-It. She did everything around the house because my dad was busy with his hobbies. So I had this tremendous curiosity for how things work, and the thrill that comes with speed and noise and all that stuff. So I entered the automotive industry at an interesting time, which became the transition to a lot of electronic controls, which had a lot of benefits and help with reducing emissions, etc. But and so I pursued, I kind of pursued that path. Interestingly, I have a master's degree in thermal sciences, i.e. combustion, and I led the electric and autonomous vehicle programs at General Motors for more than a decade. So that combustion degree was of use for a little bit, but yeah, I landed in a good place. And so it took me, so I'll fast forward a bit, it really took me a long time. When I was growing up, when I was first in college, my first job, people weren't talking about purpose. Like, that was not a conversation that was happening. Like, somebody asked me what my purpose was. I'm like, what are you talking about? If you asked me what I liked, I could talk about that all day long. And so I made decisions. I followed my heart instead of my head, and I say it worked out okay. And I even did that at times when I took jobs that were a salary reduction, just because it was something I was really excited about and passionate about. Anyhow, I learned over time that what really motivated me was technology and learning and figuring out how can you really change, in some cases, change the world, change people's lives by technology developments, innovation, etc. And so for a lot of my career in automotive, I found myself working very much on the front end of the business. I started in electrification. It wasn't cool. No one had ever heard of Elon Musk. Couldn't spell electrification. And but there's like hard work that has to be done when you're trying to do something differently. And one thing you touched on, Lee, that I would that I could really relate to was in these early days of electrification. I mean, we were putting out the Chevy Volt, which I don't know if anybody heard of that. No, that's too bad. It was the first car that full electric performance but took away range anxiety. So you could drive it all electrically. If you didn't charge it, yes, there was a gas generator on board. So if you hadn't, thought about it. So we learned a lot about what customers liked, because in the end, you figure out that people say one thing, but how they behave with their wallet is another. And so you really need to deliver things to them that they feel no compromise, and something that they have some passion and interest in. And a great no compromise example is, there had never been a car that you had to plug in before. And so we went to work to figure out, like, what do you do about that? And so we made a conscious decision to make that coupler look like a gas post, a gas coupler, because people would be familiar and not afraid of it. And I could go on and on from there. I mean, the fact we could expose people to electric driving with no worry about range was an amazing thing. And we learned the things that they liked about electric drive and what we needed to lean into, and the things that frankly didn't matter. And they, while we can talk about the environment all day long, and that is motivating, but they also like the fact it's quiet. The acceleration is, the most amazing kick in the pants for even the smallest cars. It's smooth, it's seamless. And so there are all these factors that you could never have learned in the classroom. You could never have learned in the conference room at work. You had to put a product out there. You had to talk to customers. They had to have butts in seats to really learn about that. But so that's been a journey, and as you all know, so I started on that journey in 2005, and we're just to the point where they're starting to be, and we're still like, I want to say months away from, and truly months, not years, away from there being kind of a plethora of choices for consumers out there. And then the autonomous challenge came about, and that was a whole nother set of opportunities and decisions to be made. I completely believe that autonomous driving will come to fruition. It's going to go through phases to get there, but I completely believe that that's going to happen. And I think we haven't even remotely imagined the ways that it can change lives, because it'll go beyond just the ride in the vehicle, or a mobile, maybe a autonomous wheelchair or what have you. It's going to have big implications that I think have yet to be imagined. Then I had a great opportunity to lead innovation at General Motors, which was about how do we take great technologies and apply them to new problem statements. So where you can really, the opportunity to, again, change lives, change experiences in ways that hadn't originally been imagined for that particular technology. So General Motors Defense, taking electrification. Defense is actually interested in electrification, but for completely different reasons than the people that are driving, on the streets today. Think about how quiet it is. Would be one hint. The insurance business, the auto insurance business, and really being able to help people become less risky drivers, and reward them for it, and on and on and on. Then I had the opportunity to lead the sustainability function at Delta Airlines, and a hard to decarbonize sector, and we'll hopefully talk about that a little bit more here going forward. But lots of learnings there, lots of opportunity. Aviation is going to make some improvements. It has a whole different set of challenges than than automotive for sure, and I'll just kind of leave it at that. Maybe we can talk about that more.
We'll come back to that later on. I feel that one of the big themes in both your answers is this idea of change. So you're both change makers, I assume, especially, and you both mentioned external stakeholders to your companies, but I bet it was pretty hard also. There is a lot of change and a lot of work to do internally within the companies and the organizations you're working at. So maybe I'll start with you first, because at Delta you were Chief Sustainability Officer, but also you were also in charge of corporate innovation. And so that role, how that empowered you to bring the change within the company, and which were the challenges you faced?
Sure. So I'm going to posture this probably differently than you expect, but the reality is if you're going to be a leader in a company, you have to learn how to work with people. It is all about collaboration. It is about working with organizations that are adjacent, not only your own, but adjacent to yours. And when you are in an area that is emerging, not fully developed, maybe the innovation hasn't even happened yet, the role that you play is, you have to play an outsized role. I always told, anybody that came to our team, like, you're going to have to operate, 2 and 3 levels above your rank in the company. Because typically it's the, the technologists, the innovators, the big idea people that can see the possibilities, and they have to share that. They have to create the imagination of that same future for other people. And then, another thing that I think is really important, I'll be curious your opinion on this, but I think we've seen a shift in the last 2 years or so of people in the sustainability function used to be, very steeped in environmental science and, all those things that are important underpinnings of a good strategy and a good plan. But what you start to see is operators, people that come from the business being put in the leadership roles of sustainability, because that's how you get things done. And so we had a lot of policy people here. I'm not a policy person, but taking what you know and applying it, think about getting things done, that is, that's where the value really comes in. So we can talk about it all day long, but at some point somebody has to figure out how do you make it happen. And so I just encourage you you're going to have obviously a fantastic education from Harvard. Many of you already have some business experience, but make that experience diverse, because you're going to need to pull on so many skills to drive significant change.
How do you get things done? How did you get things done at Nike, for example?
Well, I completely agree, Pam, with your observation about that evolution of chief sustainability officers. And I think, the answer isn't just the information that you have. It isn't just the idea or the business case. You could make money on this. You could save 19% on quality costs. You could generate more productivity in your manufacturing. You could get more revenue for a particular product. If it isn't, somehow enabled to change, it's not going to be taken up. And I think that's the piece that this was maybe like, as you tell your team members to kind of operate at that higher level and really communicate, and you were mentioning reaching out and building more of a community. This is the kind of thing that actually can enable the change, is helping, yes, people see what that future state is, but also understand what is that cost curve, how do we lower it, what are the different pieces that need to actually be in place in that future state, and then say, I'm going to talk to these people and these people and these people, whether it's the finance team or the third-party suppliers, or whether it's actually engaging some of the NGOs externally or the consumer groups. Those are things that are the kind of enabling conditions. So you can do something within a company to drive that change, but the company operates in itself, it's a very complex ecosystem, and then it operates within a wider ecosystem. And so for change really to be adopted at speed and scale, those all need to be taken into account. So very much agree, Pam, with the kind of outreach and the ability to communicate the ideas, being able to, and actually to be dogged at it. And if you know that that's where you're going to be going, it can take a while.
Yeah.
Right? It can take a while. But I think, bringing people along in some of these very pragmatic things that, we might not think of, I don't have the skill around science, or I don't have the skill of kind of understanding a combustion engine and this kind of thing. If you understand how an innovation pipeline works, and you understand how to bring people along through governance decisions, those are like key skills that you need to be able to do these kinds of things, and which, I deployed all the time and still do.
Yeah. In the end, like, if you want to drive big change, right? If you're going to change an industry, if you're going to change, a global outlook on something, every stakeholder has to come to the table. And so that's the corporates, that's NGOs, that's the financiers, that's policy and government. Because if everybody doesn't come to the table, you can't have the same impact. And so that's why it's great that there are so many disciplines represented here, besides the policy, public health, environmental science, et cetera, because all of that is going to be required to make it happen.
I feel like when we talk about tackling climate change, there is a lot going on, especially in the energy sector, like clean tech, and a lot of startups and these startup ecosystem, like venture capital. And in Lee were the strategy and innovation advisor for the Earthshot Prize. Last year, the Earthshot Prize was here in Boston.
I know.
I was there, and I saw
I was there.
Can you tell us a bit more about that process? How was it? Where do you see the highest potential? And there is also this valley of death where startups tend to die because there is not enough capital, not enough talent, or maybe not a good enough policy system in place. So how can we solve that? Easy question.
Easy question, yeah. No, you're right. I had the great honor of working with the Earthshot Prize and my dear friend Hannah Jones, who's the CEO, and I was there at the big shindig at Fenway in December. That was fantastic. The thing is, we have to have a lot of ideas, and what we were trying to do with the Earthshot Prize is actually build optimism and build the space for these ideas and build it globally, because what we know is needed is that these solutions have to happen around the whole world, and they have to have really key elements to them where we're building in things that are thinking about long term at the beginning. So when we were developing up the kind of structure and thinking about how the search works and so on, figuring out what are the key areas that are most important to drive change, preserving rainforest acreage, thinking about blue carbon, right? But then we also needed to think with the innovative companies or NGOs sometimes, what stage do they need to be at such that if their idea is wins or is viable, how can they grow quickly? So thinking about the stage, but thinking also about some of their capabilities and some of the approaches they take. Are they thinking about this from a equitability perspective? Are they using some of these technologies that are going to get them to scale faster, whether it's legal instruments or data? These are things that will help kind of propel it. And so thinking about how some of those innovations can come to fore quickly, we use those kinds of structures. And it's actually all laid out. If you want to go have a look at the website, there are all those decision criteria in there. But then what's really needed is this ecosystem that we were just talking about. And this is where the Earthshot has gone to this next level of being a platform to bring ecosystem players together. So they've got finance interested, they've got different companies that can actually advise some of these startups on how to go faster, or even partner with them. So thinking about what is the ecosystem that allows startups to grow has also been necessary in part of that. Sometimes companies have their own innovation arms within them. They'll have an R&D, almost all the large ones will have some form of R&D, but they might have an innovation lab, they might have some kind of function, a venture function, and that is also a very interesting space because it allows the ideas to be created, but then for it to kind of immediately embed into the company.
Mm-hmm.
because in business school we say that there are incumbents
Yeah.
and then disruptors,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I would say that probably GE and Delta are like incumbents. So how do big corporations, like the ones you work at, enable this ecosystem?
So the best example I can think of is the Chevrolet Bolt. Anybody heard of that? Now, we have at least one owner. We had an owner. And so the Bolt came to market before the Model 3 by a lot. And, you know, there's a lot of lessons learned in that, which the easiest way I can describe it, and the same thing was true for the Volt, is that the mission was very focused. And it was about 200 miles of range, under $40,000, and launch it in 2016. And that launch date was October 31st. I don't know why it was Halloween, but that's what it was. And so we got people like really focused. We'd given them, you know, if the team had like 100 priorities, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And then we had, you know, the beauty is we had global scale. And so we had an engineering team in Korea, we had an engineering team in the US, and basically we handed off the work twice every day. And, you know, given the priorities that we had to make decisions quickly. And so it kind of pushes through some of the, I don't know, I don't want to say misses any steps, but it gets people to pay attention quickly, make decisions quickly, so that you can keep moving. And you know, I saw that recipe work on the Volt. That mission was very simple. It was actually, you're going to die, but 40 miles of electric range, all electric range, which is the average commute in the U.S. is 40 miles or less. And launch it in 2010. That was it. And you know, things like that get people really focused. So I think it can be done. You know, there's benefits to both, and a lot of times you see, you know, when things are small, it's good to have small teams and be able to react quickly. But at some point, when you're talking about things that you commercialize at, you know, billion-dollar kind of investments, you know, that's a different kind of commitment. And sometimes you can draw from the famed incumbents as well.
Good to know. We need everyone at the table, so. We are part of like a self-selecting group that really believes in climate, that really believes in sustainability, but it's not like for everyone like that. And recently we've seen a lot of like ESG pushback, and organizations are like struggling with like greenwashing lawsuits. I think today the SEC introduced the climate disclosure requirements, and there has been a lot of pushback on that. I'll start with you, Lea. How do you support corporations, organizations to remain relevant in this debate? You talk a lot about engagement before. How do you like help them to like remain actively engaged and like to keep like committed to their like goals, sustainable goals?
Yeah. Well, yes, the SEC ruling, was it already just yesterday? It was.
Seems like a long time ago.
Yeah. You know, I think the most important thing that is very obvious to people running businesses is that climate risk is a financial risk, and businesses are managing that. If they have operations that are global, they know that their supply chains have been disrupted in some way or another with whether it's, you know, products, inputs into their supply chain if they're a food manufacturer, or if it's something that they're moving from A to B on ships, there's going to have been some impact that they've already been feeling. And in addition, many of the inputs are increasing in cost because, the wheat harvests are less each degree that you go up. All of these things are playing a part of reality now. And so for companies, they know that that's an issue. They know that that's the most important thing they need to be aware of is managing risk as they're operating and then moving forward and creating value. And what's going on with anti-ESG right now, some of it is it's very much in the political space. Yeah, it's very much in the political space, and but where we're able to really understand and know how companies are actually either creating value from decarbonization or they're faring better because they've been managing their risk, that's where we're able to say, actually, taking into account climate is important in how you're running your business. It is effective from a business continuity perspective and securing your operations, which then, the issue of politics is not it's not relevant in that conversation. And I think that's where we see the greatest strength. There are companies that have been pulling back from some of the engagements and commitments there, but actually still in their companies, what's happening inside those companies, they're still reporting, they're still preparing those data, they're still making those decisions for themselves. And because they're needing to do that for themselves, that is demonstrating that they value it. They're making their internal decisions based on it.
You were part of of two of these organizations that were like under enormous scrutiny from the market. So how did you?
Yeah, this is the way that I think about it. When you're I think that there is a much greater awareness across, across corporations, across academic institutions. Just the awareness around. I'm particularly talking about climate. The awareness has gone up tremendously, and so. I think we've probably achieved the point where there's even, always a bit of bias in decisions based on, a background or a more knowledgeable position around impacts on climate. And so I think that is great. And then when you're talking about, companies don't turn on a dime. For instance, like the evolution of electric cars. And I'm speaking from the U.S. perspective, primarily in policy, if every time administrations change an administrative point of view on emissions or change, if the smart people who, worked on them, if they stopped working on it, we would never get there. And so when you're talking about like big consumer changes, industrial changes, that can't ebb and flow. You can't turn it on and off. And so I believe that through a lot of great efforts, awareness is much higher. Decisions, sustainability, climate is embedded in decision sets right now. It may not always go that way, but at least it's part of the conversation. And given that, you're going to see more change happen. Another, so I don't know if that, hopefully that made sense, but you just can't start and stop big things like this. The other thing I would tell you is, whether it's in life, in your corporate life, in your personal life, there's a multitude of opinions. And so I usually start conversations by saying, I'm not here to convince you that climate science is true or false. But what is important is that people that, a company cares about climate science. And so therefore we need to care about it. And otherwise, the arguments can ensue forever, and you just kind of have to get past that.
Now you are board of director at Momentum, right? And I feel that when I came to business school, I was like, oh, all the change and all the initiatives are driven by the management of the company, but actually board of directors, especially for very long-term initiatives and like a long-term strategy, play a massive role. So can you tell us more about how do you see yourself as a board of directors? What are the different layers within the organization, and who is really driving
Sure.
climate strategy?
So the board has just a board in the U.S. has just a few primary responsibilities. One is to hire the CEO and determine the compensation. Two is to approve the long-term strategy of the company. Three is to approve the capital expenditures. I think four is to hold the company accountable to deliver on that strategy. And so given that, the board absolutely has a role in, obviously, the management team of the company is far more intimate into the details, but the board has the ability to kind of look across and say, okay, our internal and external influences being considered in that, and as the management reports out on their progress toward the strategy, say, okay, well, we're hearing a lot about this topic, whether it's AI, we'll just use that as an example, and how is the company dealing with that and thinking about it, and does the plan need to be modified to incorporate a new emerging topic or not? So that's really the role of the board to approve that strategy, to be familiar with it, and to get regular updates and provide feedback to the management.
And so you're nodding, and in your work, what's your relationship with like board of directors of the companies you're working with? Do you engage with them, or?
I was nodding because of the long-term aspect, and what's really important, I think, in that board function, from having sat in front of the board and presented at Nike and different places, are the questions that the board can ask. And when the board is able to ask, have you considered this? What is the long-term plan on this particular thing? Then the rest of the organization responds to that, and it generates a whole lot of thinking. So I think that board function of being able to ask the kinds of questions about the strategy, in addition to the other responsibilities, is powerful. Engaging, I'd say that the other thing about engaging with the boards, it's not something that is it's an incredibly powerful thing, and it's an incredibly powerful opportunity on a number of fronts for an NGO like the Environmental Defense Fund, or if you're in different NGO roles to be able to engage with the board. It can provide this opportunity to share really important insight that the board might not normally have access to, that NGOs or academics bring. It also can send a very powerful message of what is expected, but also, good job, you're moving in the right direction. And I think that it can be incredibly powerful in the relationship between an NGO and boards, and it is something that we don't. I think we don't always look for that. Sometimes companies and the boards of those companies sometimes might be fearful of NGOs, might not want to engage with them. This is not the case with what you've led, Pam, but it is the case with a lot of companies that they are fearful of NGOs, that they're going to be highly critical, and then there'll be a lot of expectation to respond to this particular criticism, rather than having a kind of an engagement where you can come to the table and find something that you're trying to bring to achievement together. And I think that the more we're able to have those kinds of actual collaborative conversations, it really can be a game changer, and I don't think we use it enough.
Yeah, you bring up a very good point. I mean, boards will have analysts come in, buy side, sell side, other very knowledgeable constituents, NGOs, and beyond. So there's all sorts of tools to keep informed and abreast of current and emerging important topics.
Thank you. Conscious of time, one last question. Words of wisdom for the audience that approaches a career in climate. What would you, when we were talking before, you share some advice about how to think about a career in climate?
Okay, I'll share a couple of things. The first, although Pam, I know you're going to have fun stories. You've already shared a number of fun stories. So I was telling Leslie this before, but when I was an undergrad, I did what undergrads do. I'm like, what am I going to do with my life? Where am I going? I don't know any of the answers to those questions. So I'll come to the Career Center and I'll do, an assessment. I did the Myers-Briggs assessment, and out popped 2 career pathways for me. Used car salesperson or preacher. I thought, that's interesting. Useless information. I'm going to carry on and do whatever I'm doing. Going off and following orangutans. It was very science focused. That's where I was going, etc. But what I realized when I'm at this stage in my career is how important skills are. Mm-hmm. And that you can label yourself different jobs, you can find out different, take different pathways, private sector, NGOs, and so on. But many of these things are skills. So apparently, at that point, what I didn't hear from that was the importance of communicating, right? And the ability to communicate and to be able to speak convincingly about what's really important and to relate to people. And I think that for me, what I reflect on now is like thinking about what skills you really have and this will get to the second thing, is when I was finishing my PhD, I sat at the back of some similar event in a very similar feeling building, and I sat in the back, I think on the floor, and had my paper, and I was drawing what makes me happy? These things. Another circle, what am I really good at? These things. What are my responsibilities in life? These things. Where can I have impact? These things. And I found some pockets of things where they overlapped. And I looked at those 3 or 4 things. I was like, this one, no possible way I could do this one. And I tried to follow a couple of them. And, some of the pathway that I took, they had a lot of different factors in it, personal, professional, and it essentially started me on a couple of paths. And those couple of paths panned out differently. And, it wasn't really what I was expecting. At that time you were talking about kind of early days. You and I were both involved in this in early days. And it has evolved a ton, and there is so much momentum and so many people on board now. I feel like at COP, everyone was like, we're here, we want to do it. Okay, what's the direction? And what I felt, what I was trying to do early in my career was to get into private sector, because that's where I wanted to be able to drive change. And this was, 2003, and I got the kind of, we'll bring someone from the inside and raise them up through the channels rather than bring someone, you like opinionated PhD person. No, we don't want you. and so I worked outside private sector for some time, and and that was productive and it was very fruitful, but it was not the path that I was expecting. So it was, kind of trying to still stay true to where my passion was, what impact I wanted to have, and how I was good at it, just different avenues to get there.
So my comments are going to be from the standpoint of, I think this is fascinating, because we have there's some overlap in the background, but a lot of things that don't overlap. I come from the operator role, where it's about delivering something tangible. And then in the chief sustainability role, you deliver a strategy and activate it, and you try to get the organization, on board to do it. And so here to me is how to bridge that gap a bit. So the first thing I try to instill in people is, I call it progress over perfection.
Sure.
Because there are certain events as a chief sustainability officer you get invited to that you never want to go back to. Because no matter how hard you're working and what you're doing and the plan that you show, it's never enough. Sometimes that's not helpful. When you are trying to motivate your team, the broader organization. And so I'm just going to use aviation as an example. So, particularly long-haul flying. There is not a certified, proven solution yet that is, free of carbon or GHGs for long-haul flying. However, there are opportunities for progress now. And so the way that, I wrapped my head around that, and that I think can resonate and activate people, is you have to think about short, medium, and long-term solutions. The reality is you have to start all three of those paths at the same time. It's just the horizon for when you're going to get to an answer, maybe not even yet implementation, is very different. And so short-term, companies can work on their energy sources and renewable energy for their facilities. Go look at the products that are used in your facilities. How much plastic is there, right? How much styrofoam is there? Is there recycling? And there's things even more sophisticated than that in your particular product line, et cetera. But my point is that short term, there's progress to be made. Medium term are things that the technical solution is usually proven, but they need to get commercialized. You need to get scale. And in aviation, I think sustainable aviation fuel is a great example of that. Most, not all of the companies that intend to produce it, because there's one today at scale, are startups. Startups to get capital to scale at the industrial level needed for long-haul flying that's a tall order. And so that's what I call the medium-term thing. That's where you've really got to have everyone around the table to make it happen. And in the U.S., if you look at the IRA, you can see that projects have been initiated where they've gotten funded from that. So it works. It can work. And then long-term, especially I take aviation, hard to decarbonize. You've got to really seek out those people that are disruptors, that are big thinkers, and the ones that you think have promise, support them. And there's many ways to support them. One is there's always investment, but there's also access to your capabilities. Whatever labs or manufacturing or prototype lines or what have you. The know-how of your people. There's many ways to support those disruptors, and you need to do that because it's, you talked about the Valley of Death a little bit ago. There's so many ways that, so many obstacles or roadblocks that can come in the way of a great idea. And you're going to need to support many because they're not all going to work out. And it maybe all about the technology doesn't work. It may not be anything about the technology. So short, medium, long term, progress now. I think that's how, that's my advice to getting traction, feeling good about what's happening today, and preparing for even a better world tomorrow.
Pam, there's another thing that I know that you've had in your career, and we were talking a bit about it before, and I've certainly had the same, which is that you might start something and you think, oh my gosh, I've only got 25% of the way what I wanted to achieve. You feel like, gosh, I haven't finished. You go do something else, you moved on. 10 years later, you look back and this thing has grown massively, and it's had enormous impact around the world. And I look at that and I think, if I could help others think, like, start things, start them. Some of them will pan out, some of them won't. The ones that, you might think, oh, they're not there yet. They actually might turn into something big. But the point is to just keep moving. Don't try to finish everything perfectly. Just move. Keep the ideas flowing. Keep going to new opportunities. And some of them will work out. Some of them will not. Yeah.
And keep working with the business, because in the end, the business has to be sustainable too.
Yeah.
And so keep working with the business. Bring things forward in a manner that's frankly digestible.
Yeah.
And that is in the same language, is in measured in ways that are similar to they're used to being measured.
Thank you. Hard.
We want to hear what their questions are. We're just rambling.
Questions. I think we have time for a few questions.
Oh, come on.
I think this was alluded to earlier, but like we see that there's huge growth spurt of like startups coming up in the space that are inventing. Many of them are inventing substitutes to what traditional industry has produced. So how do you see this tension between industry versus what startups are producing, especially in like say green steel, green cement, maybe even in like transportation and aviation particularly? How do you see that tension playing out in the future?
So, I'm sure you did this on the World Economic Forum events. They talk about all of the, you just touched on some of the other hard to decarbonize sectors, and some of it is, it's awareness. And, where there's the opportunity for progress now, I think companies will latch onto it. If it's scaled in a real way and in and the economics have to make some amount of sense. They can't be infinitely more expensive. And then you'll see, sometimes where there's a good idea, but it needs more investment, it needs, needs somebody's production capability. You're going to see a whole mix of things, from either acquisitions, from licensing of technology, to investment, to these startups can actually grow on their own. So there's not one answer to any of that. It all matters. I mean, all those approaches matter.
I have a question. So, you mentioned a lot about startup, innovating technologies, but I don't have a science background. So I think previously I talked to an alumni who worked on the carbon capture and storage, something like that. And he showed me the solution that he wants to put in practice. But as I don't have a science background, so I cannot tell that whether this science, technology, this innovation works. Well, what if it's just
Yeah, you don't have to. But I bet when you look at that, you said, where's all that hydrogen come from? Or you said, really, can we really put all this in the ground, and what happens over time? And I think you have to get a lot of eyes on opportunities, because you're going to get a multitude of perspectives and questions maybe they hadn't thought about yet. So don't feel intimidated about it. I think one of the best skills that you could have at any level, and definitely at the leadership level, is have the humility to ask questions, because you don't have all the answers as a leader. So never be afraid to do that. And you're going to come at it from a certain lens that'll be different than somebody else. So just ask the questions, and use your intuition to say, that didn't sound like a great answer, right? To know where there needs to be more progress or help or what have you. Maybe
Well, the other thing is science is part of new innovations, and there are many other pieces around it. We talked several times throughout the panel here about the ecosystem around business. And so, the kinds of questions that we need to interrogate new businesses and startups really are not only about, is it viable for that particular, the science behind it, right? But in addition, are these other pieces able to play a role in helping it grow? There might be an absolutely perfect, from a scientific perspective, solution to carbon capture and underground storage, but the policy environment might be completely wrong, so it's already dead in the water. Or it might, there might be many instances like that where a piece of it works, but the others don't. So it's not just the individual, science that we need to understand, it's also that kind of broader ecosystem. Do they have the capability internally in the company with the employees that have the right kind of skills and knowledge to be able to grow? Are they set up well from a kind of perspective in terms of their own governance? There are many things that will tell you whether it actually is viable, as a startup going forward.
Thank you for all you've presented so far. Many of us here are studying public policy, and we often hear about the friction that may arise between the private sector and the, at least policy making. Would you have any advice for us, or any examples in your career where you thought, well, these policymakers really need to better understand the private sector, and ways to sort of improve these relations, because we always hear that the private sector is implementing what policymakers create, but maybe not always efficiently.
It would be hard to have perfect policy and perfect in this industry. There's always going to be friction there. I think that the best skill we can all have is to be a good listener. And I think each side needs to hear the other side and really hear it, not just okay, whatever, but really hear it and understand why are they saying the things that